Hi, welcome to Superhero Rundown. I'm Crimson, and today we'll be looking at Batman and Bruce Wayne, specifically the Christopher Nolan trilogy. Yes, I could cover the other Batmans. I have, but this trilogy is standalone, and it has a lot of important things to discuss. Look, if you haven't done your homework like I did, you're out of luck. Also, these movies are 10 years old now, so that's Good Lord, I'm old. So let's start at the beginning. I hear it's a very good place to start. According to Callum Russell, by the time Batman Begins arrived in 2005, the flickers of what would become a flourishing genre were just beginning to light, with Christopher Nolan bringing something that Singer nor Raimi had, an indisputable quality of realism. Where superhero movies of the past had shown little respect to their characters, treating each like a cartoonish property, Nolan showed that these films could be both financial blockbusters, but also great films in their own right. I would go so far as to say that there are some movies that, while cartoonish, did honor their characters. Batman from 1989 comes to mind, as does X-Men from 2000. What I'm saying is that Russell makes a good point about Nolan making financial blockbusters and great films, but he's definitely wrong about the little respect for character. 1966's Batman the Movie is amazing, and you can check out Patrick H. Willems' video for that. But the Dark Knight trilogy is unique because we had never been shown the origin of Batman. Sure, we saw Bruce Wayne's parents murdered in the street, but we had never seen Batman become Batman until Batman Begins, at least in a live-action film. Russell continues, Batman Begins was a groundbreaking success for this reason, cherry-picking Batman, his antagonists, origin story, and iconography, and slotting them into the template of a real-world setting. Suddenly, such became the formula to reinvent all of cinema's tired characters. James Bond's reboot Casino Royale, Spider-Man's reimagining in 2012, even Superman's take in 2013 would each utilize a dark aesthetic reconditioning each character for a modern treatment. The idea was to make each property more grounded and more palpable. But of course, this was rather a blind choice, as whilst Batman's gothic Gotham may be suitable for such a setting, Spider-Man's colorful New York is not. I want to look at the films through the lens of themes and motifs, specifically about how Batman is the actual character we're following and Bruce Wayne is the mask he wears, how Nolan accomplishes this in the first two films, and how even though the third movie exists, maybe it shouldn't. I love Nolan's films, but when you love something, you should be able to see its flaws. And man, The Dark Knight Rises has a lot of flaws. We start with the Duality of Man, not just for Batman and Bruce Wayne, but for Ra's al Ghul and Henri Ducard as well. And let's not forget about Scarecrow and Jonathan Crane. All of them have a face that is their mask and a face that is their true self. Let's start with Scarecrow. He's an unassuming doctor, and he, like Batman, appears in all three movies of the trilogy. In fact, in terms of realistic interpretations of Batman's villains, Scarecrow set the bar. Scarecrow, as we all know, uses fear toxin. In this movie, he has the underlying menace of Scarecrow while wearing the mask of Jonathan Crane. By the time of The Dark Knight Rises, he rips that mask right off, and Scarecrow is the one really presiding over the trials of those who have wronged society. Vinnie Mancuso explains why the character is so important to the trilogy. The character eventually became the avatar for Gotham's madness across the two sequels, introducing us to the city's new comic booky standard of crime in The Dark Knight, and then again passing slightly biased judgment on the city's elite in The Dark Knight Rises. That, in itself, was essential. I've always loved a Gotham City that isn't so much threatened by a single antagonist, but just sort of infected down to the roots with increasingly crazier crime. Sure, Batman's attention might be on one thing right now, but Penguin is still running a dang casino down on Fifth Avenue, while Killer Croc hassles folks down by the docks. Murphy randomly popping up with a burlap sack over his head is the only time I felt that on screen. And I agree. When I rewatched these, even though I think The Dark Knight Rises is terrible, Cillian Murphy as Scarecrow lit up the screen as the judge and jury of the elites in the film. While Scarecrow has a distinct moment where he flips and is Scarecrow for the rest of the films, when he poisons Rachel, Ra's is a bit different. Ra's meets Bruce in prison and convinces him to join the League of Assassins, where he trains to purge his fear. When he comes back after seemingly having died as Henri, he embraces being Ra's, leaving the mask of Henri behind. Batman also has a moment with him about killing or not. He doesn't have to kill him, but he doesn't have to save him either. Realistically, it works, but for Batman it doesn't. Batman is supposed to not kill, and yet he kills a lot of people across most live-action Batmans. Ra's comes back in a way in The Dark Knight Rises, but let's save that for later. Let's get to Bale's Batman. Bruce Wayne is Batman's mask. There's no way around it. When he fights, he always fights as Batman, whether or not he's actually in the cowl. But let's explore what Batman represents as a character and in society. In Batman, An American Mr. Hyde by Andreas Reichstein, they bring up this point. Besides all these formal similarities between Wayne and Jekyll, the essential link between these characters lies in their basic trait, their double identity, their double personality. At first glance, their motives for having chosen or tried out the other identity seem to be very different. Jekyll gives birth to his evil self to demonstrate the duality of man. Wayne wants to become a symbol of crime fighting, and yet there is much more to it. I can't become a policeman as I'd intended to. They're too often hamstrung by the very law they're sworn to uphold, Wayne says in one comic book at his parents' grave. This is the point again, which shows the difference between other fictional characters like Zorro or famous detectives on the one hand, and Wayne/Batman on the other. He has chosen to operate outside the law, to impose his own laws. In this vein, the question really becomes, did Bruce Wayne become the mask when his parents died, or when he trained to overcome his fear with the League of Assassins? Nolan even brings this up in his interview with Scott Foundas in Film Comment with Lincoln Center. The fragmented identity of Bruce Wayne/Batman, which is certainly a central part of the character, is much more present in your films, and they seem related to an interest you have in the dual, or sometimes more than dual nature of identity. It's paradoxical, but in order to get at the duality of Bruce Wayne, we had to make him into three people. I sat down with Christian early on, and we decided there's the private Bruce Wayne, who only Alfred and Rachel really get to see, the public Bruce Wayne, which is this mask he puts on of this decadent playboy, and then the creature of Batman that he's created to strike back at the world. By making him into these three aspects, you really start to see the idea that you have a private person who is wrestling with all kinds of demons and trying to make something productive out of that. And yes, you can definitely see the contrast between the three that Nolan put in the film, but a good movie doesn't have a good character, it has good themes. Let's talk about Heath Ledger's Joker. This is probably my favorite iteration of the Joker. I love Mark Hamill, but there's just something beautifully sinister about Heath Ledger's Joker. In The Dark Knight, we have the perfect villain with Heath Ledger. We are first introduced to him as he robs a bank and has his goons shoot each other once they complete their tasks. While the Joker wants to give Gotham a better class of criminal, he doesn't want to kill Batman. But unfortunately for him, Batman is usually the aggressor in this film. And that's not to say that killing people, threatening people, and burning a big pile of money isn't bad. They are, except for the last one. It's just that when the Joker does something, Batman responds with violence. Let's start with the interrogation of the Joker once he's captured. Gordon starts off the exercise, and when he leaves, Batman takes over. However, Batman begins by beating the shit out of the Joker. When Batman asks why the Joker wants to kill him, the Joker's response is telling.
I don't want to kill you. What would I do without you? Go back to ripping off mob dealers? No, you complete me.
The Joker later describes their relationship as what happens when
an unstoppable force meets an immovable object.
Their relationship isn't one of good versus evil, rather they are two sides of the same coin, good violence and bad violence. This is why the Joker can add,
I think you and I are destined to do this forever.
Unless we forget, Batman was going to at least maim the hostages Joker is using at the end of the film. As the movie progresses, we see the hysteria the Joker wishes to create take over Gotham while he plays his games with Batman. Bott goes on. The complexity of the Joker lies precisely in his satanic nature, a nature that Gerard describes as paradoxical. The fundamental paradox of Satan is that he is a principle of order as much as disorder. The Satan expelled is that one who foments and exasperates mimetic rivalries to the point of transforming the community into a furnace of scandals. The Satan who expels is the same furnace when it reaches a point of incandescence sufficient to set off the single victim mechanism. To prevent the destruction of his kingdom, Satan makes out of his disorder itself, at its highest heat, a means of expelling himself. Joker's crowning achievement in the film is turning Harvey Dent into Two-Face. It's not the boats, it's not the violence. He took the proclaimed White Knight of Gotham and turned him into something else. He explains he's an agent of chaos and he doesn't really have plans. The Dark Knight is also the film where Batman declares he can have no limits, so he doesn't, even at the expense of losing someone he loves. So with Dent turning into a bad person, threatening Gordon's son, Batman decides, with everything going on, that because the Joker can't win, he has to become a villain, taking the blame for Harvey Dent's murder, just like Dent foreshadowed.
Okay, fine. You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Bott elaborates even further on this. The hysteria and disorder within Gotham has reached the point of conflictual mimesis, and Batman himself has become so scandalized by the Joker that his decision to sacrifice himself is predicated not by what is right or good, but solely on his insistence that
The Joker cannot win.
the nobility of Wayne's desire to inspire good has vanished, and in its place is the solitary desire to overcome the Joker. To do so, Batman offers himself as a sacrifice, a scapegoat, for the citizens of Gotham to be united against in their hysteria. Batman's willingness to be identified as the murderer and consequently cast out provides for the catharsis and resolution of Gotham, which is illustrated by the few brief clips of Gotham standing united in their opposition of Batman at the end of the film. So let's talk about the mess that is The Dark Knight Rises. Actually, fuck that. Let's talk about something else. The symbol of Batman in the Dark Knight trilogy. What about the long-lasting appeal of Batman? He's been around since 1939. Part of the appeal of the Caped Crusader is the gray area that he occupies outside the justice system. This is a character who observed flaws in the justice system and decided that his unlimited resources and mental acumen could position him perfectly to spend his nights beating criminals in the name of justice. Obviously, it requires a certain suspension of disbelief to buy into the idea, as it does with all superhero stories, but Batman's disregard for the law is a narrative that holds a mirror to society, offering many questions and very few answers about why this is such an enthralling part of his character. His moral code, achieving justice by any means necessary, fulfills the common American's fantasy of making the world right by sheer strength of will. Steeped in self-sacrifice for the greater good, the narrative appeals to the popular image of the self-made man who works past obstacles without help. Making moral judgments is inherent to all humans in the same way social comparison is, and Batman provides the fantasy of owning and becoming that moral force. But no killing, except it seems that the Nolan Batman has no problem with leaving Ra's to die, or killing Harvey Dent, or Talia dying in The Dark Knight Rises, so they're more like guidelines than actual rules. Well, you may say, but Batman has trauma because of the witnessing of his parents' murder when he was 6 to 9 years old. But he clung to bats, which is part of his true persona. He is as threatening as the evil he fights. To achieve this, Bruce Wayne has chosen the bat as his costume. Bats do not have to be frightening, though. In choosing this animal, Kane and Finger subconsciously use the frightening side, the mystic side of the bat, which is also apparent in the vampire tales, especially in another Gothic novel, Bram Stoker's Dracula. Stoker based his novel on the historic Dracula Vlad Tepes, son of the Wallachian ruler Vlad Dracul. Because of Tepes's well-known cruelties, legend made him a bloodthirsty, blood-drinking villain. Since the end of the 18th century, tales of the blood-drinking bat, in combination with humans as vampires, have played an important part in European literature, from Lord Byron to Charles Baudelaire. The mythological connection between the bat and the devil is well established. Bat and devil are often used synonymously. Those associated with the devil are said to become vampires, and the appearance of a vampire is the bat. Batman is a trauma response to a boy who witnessed his parents' murder, and that becomes his true self. Trauma responses are varied. For example, my trauma response is holding this. I have also been known to cry, punch pillows, and scream into the void. My point is, if I had the capital to be Batman, that could very well be my trauma response. Dr. Travis Langley, friend of the show and awesome author of books, wrote about this in Batman and Psychology, A Dark and Stormy Night. When tragedy challenges your worldview, you question your goals and beliefs. To make sense of injustice, we may draw one of three global conclusions. 1. People will get the justice they deserve. 2. There is no justice. And 3. Justice happens, but it needs our help. Batman takes the third approach with Gotham. He knows that the justice system can only do so much, and rather than take his money and fix the infrastructure, help the homeless, or, anything a billionaire could do with their money to do anything productive, he decides to be Batman and put people in Arkham Asylum. But Dr. Langley has our remedy when it comes to social contracts and society. Moral reasoning by social contract recognizes that because people establish society's rules by mutual agreement and compromise, society's contract with its members is no longer binding if the rules become destructive or if the parties to that contract fail to live up to their respective sides of the agreement. When corrupt authorities fail to promote and defend citizens' welfare, when that corruption allows crime to flourish, social contractual reason holds that greater ethical principles must take priority, and a law higher than that of the official lawmakers and law officers should take over. Society's contract is only as good as the structures holding it up. So since everything is on fire right now, do we have an obligation to uphold the contract? Or do we have the obligation to protect our welfare and be the Batman?